About 1996, I was lured under false pretenses to go to the office of the chair of the biology department at a Christian college. And that was my first year there. I was a junior professor. And when I got to his office, well, he said, let's go talk in the conference room. And when we got there, at this big, long, brown table at the end was the dean of sciences at a Christian college. I felt like Luke being cornered by Darth and the Emperor in, I guess it was Return of the Jedi. Anyway, what it amounted to was a 2-hour and 45-minute long session of trying to deprogram me from being a creationist, because at this Christian school, they believed evolution was the way. And the dean said to me at one heated point in their argument with me, well, Dr. Jackson, what do you think about junk DNA? And I said, well, I think you're going to say that someday they're going to find a purpose for it, aren't you? And him and the chair laughed at me because they knew, of course, that's what I was going to say. That was 1996. About 2005, they started finding out, junk DNA did have a purpose. And in 2012, dozens of papers from all over the world confirmed it. There's no such thing, and there never was. So why did people think that? Because it was used as evidence, proof positive that evolution must be true. These were the leftover remnants, the vestiges of back when we had DNA when we were worms and fish and lizards. And now here's just a little bit more today on this sort of thing. Look at this. Doubled up DNA helps define us as humans. Look what it says. Duplicate junk regions may be involved in disease, study finds. So what they found out was that we actually have many copies, sometimes duplicate, maybe triplicate copies of the same genes. And then they found out they're doing different things. This is real complicated for an accidental duplicate copy, don't you think? And there are other genes that regulate these genes, and they only regulate the so-called duplicate. Well, maybe God just gave us from the beginning 2 copies of these kind of genes. It turns out having more copies of these genes makes us different from monkeys. And none of the monkeys have these duplications, but we do. In other words, we have more copies of some of the humanifying genes than monkeys do. Things that make our brains bigger and such. Look at what it says here. DNA that doesn't produce proteins. Well, you see, because it didn't produce proteins, we couldn't backtrack it from a protein and trace out where the gene was. That's why they called it junk, because they couldn't figure out what it did. So since we're brilliant, if we couldn't figure out what it did, it must not did anything. Yeah, that's more arrogance again. And why was this arrogance significant? Because it was led by evolutionary presuppositions that not only should there be junk organs, there should be junk DNA, vestigial organs and vestigial DNA, leftovers from our evolutionary past. So it had to be there, and it was proof of evolution. So guided by that misleading, misguiding, misinformed untruth, they declared these things as true. And it's the way that it disturbs. These things are duplicated in people, but not in other primates. I'm asking, are they really copies of old genes, or maybe we originally got 2? Well, cars are made with 4 tires, aren't they? Well, 2 headlights. Maybe we needed more of these genes than the monkeys did in order for us to be humans. And they're saying that mutations in those genes actually cause some of the mental disorders that monkeys don't have, but we do, because we've got an extra copy, and whenever they mutate, it sounds like those extra copies are kind of important, and maybe they're not really junk at all. Look at what it says about the history. Far from being junk, this DNA is where molecular switches that control gene activity. The reason why these genes don't make proteins is they're busy. 98% of all the DNA actually and with maybe some 90%. So we couldn't figure out what 98% of the DNA was doing. So we said 98% of it was junk and only 2% of it actually did anything. But really, the rest of it is where the coordinating central nervous processing system was. It was actually the brain center of all our DNA was what they called the junk. And of course, those two professors never, I mean, when it happened, I did send them an email, but I never got a response except hatefulness back to me. But that's all they know. That's all they have. Some are copied more than once. It's important, these overlooked regions. You know why it was overlooked? Because evolution theory said to overlook it. So they made a mistake in science, a huge one that took 50 years to correct, because we creationists were saying 50 years ago there's no such thing as junk DNA because God don't make no junk. And I was teased for it mercilessly, and of course they denied me tenure at that school, and it was the science department that led the way. It got the education department, overrode them, and of course when the new chair of education came in, I was toast within months of that. But, you know, it's a Christian school. I thought it'd be fine. These are switches. They're enhancers. Look at all, some of the enhancers are not present in the original copy. Well, then how did the new copy become more advanced? Was it just by accidental changes? Those mutations that by magic accidentally somehow become more sophisticated? Look at the second copy stuff. This gets more stupendous every time. People can carry 2 to 5 copies of these things. Why if we don't need them? Oh my goodness. The idea that they would duplicate by accident, that could happen, of course. The gene duplication theory. But then that the new copy would become better than the old copy by a magical process that adds sophistication and information to the DNA. Deletions that remove some of these enhancers have been linked to these disorders. Now, don't let them fool you. A deletion is a mutation. It really does just delete one of the nucleotides in the nucleotide sequence and changes the entire thing. A deletion is a frame shift mutation, which usually destroys everything in that particular gene, maybe even downstream into other genes in that chromosome. It can be pretty bad. Well, this whole legacy of going down the wrong road, barking up the wrong tree because of evolutionary thinking being science error thinking has led to many, many delays in the progress of science. Evolution stagnates every field of science in which it enters. Genetics, immunology, agriculture, everything that it touches, disease management theories, the idea that bacteria can gain immunity to our new drugs, and so can viruses that they never had before. Those misleading things are causing the struggles in all endeavors in science, especially those associated with biology and human health. Anyway, I just wanted to show you this. I chuckle when I see these admissions, and now they're trying to spin it that, but junk DNA has these important evolutionary features to it that y'all need to know about these switches getting better and better after accidental copies are made. Well, it's just more of the smoke and mirrors and more of the evolutionarily Darwin believer, misguided science thinking. But you keep thinking because you have the mind of Christ and you understand all mysteries. Well, at least mysteries no evolutionist can understand as long as they stay wedded to the evolutionary Darwin paradigm. God bless. Keep thinking. Dr. J.